Okay, the last panel, how does it feel? It's almost finished. Are you sad? No, not sad. I'm sad, I'm very sad. Well, but this last panel is going to be very interesting as well as all the previous one. What are we talking about when we are calling for more accessibility in public procurement processes? I am sure this panel knows the answer. Moderated by the Vice President of the European Disability Forum, give her a big hand, Gunta Anka!
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Perfect. I would say that you are very, very brave. Do you know why? Because this is the last panel, and only the brave people can stay for such a long time for a really interesting conference, but still such a long one. So thank you for staying with me and with my perfect panel. And as you know already, we are going to speak more today about money. And money is always interesting, of course. So when we are speaking about money, we are speaking about public procurement. What I'd like to say, I just have I'm not going to talk about history, because we have a lot of histories today. I'm going to talk a bit about statistics. I just have one number, and the number is 14. So 14% of European GDP is public procurement. Do you know what it means? It means that all 14% of public procurement will provide accessible services and accessible goods. How accessible Europe will be? I would say much, much more better. But it's not yet. And I would like to say yet, because we are starting our way to accessibility. I'm coming from small country, Latvia, and we are making some kind of survey by asking our companies, do you know something about European Accessibility Act? Do you know something about accessibility? And 7 of 10 said, wow, what is this? What should I do? Something bad happened with me after June 28th. And we said, no, nothing bad, but you should provide accessibility. And that is what we are going to talk today. It's also important to remember that nothing will happen automatically. So it requires very clear rules, cooperation, and understanding what it is exactly. That's why today I have a fantastic panelists. 2 of them are with me here at the table. 2 of them are somewhere, I don't know where, but online. So today we have Chiara Giovanni from MONEC and Alistair Gianto. He is legal and policy advisor from the government of Malta. We also online will have Monserrata Coeto, Deputy Director General from Spain's Ministry of Social Rights, and Peter Kemeny. He is accessibility consultant from Hungary. But if I'm not saying enough about you, I'll be happy if you add. So thanks so much. And we already have few questions we agreed we are going to talk about today more. So the first one is how we can go from policy to practice. Because it's nice to have a nice documents. It's nice to have a good policy, but we need real examples. So can you share some very concrete examples that could be good or successful into public procurement? It could be a national, regional, or maybe even organizational level. And I know that Alistair already has some ideas about Malta and Malta's case, so maybe you can start with some ideas.
Okay, thank you. So it's never easy to be the first one to start, but good afternoon, everyone. And it definitely is a great occasion to finally be celebrating the entry into force of the European Accessibility Act. I've been more or less involved with this file since 2017, although I am aware that people have been pushing for this for years before that. So, the first example I wanted to mention, I have a couple from Malta. It relates to a conference which we organized earlier this year. So, for the first time in Malta, we organized a National Autism Conference. It was prioritizing the voices of self-advocates and also linked to a European project which we are leading, Activate, so some promotion there also. So what we had to do was we had to book a venue through the Ministry for Inclusion so that the conference could take place there. And maybe one of the questions is this: so what actually makes accessibility in public procurement work? What I would say is it's the will first and foremost, because when we put out the request, one of our team members automatically said, okay, look, I have some notes about what would make the place not only physically but also sensorially accessible. We have autistic people who will be participating in the conference. So this was something which the person volunteered themselves before we actually went down into the rules, into what would actually be in the description of the call for procurement. So I was really happy with this because in any case, would have to have drafted this call, but the organizational culture was changing in our team. So automatically, this was a person who, this was above her pay grade, but I mean still, she was okay, I won't just prepare the document, but I will also suggest a number of things which we've been seeing from other projects we've been involved in, just to make sure that the criteria in the call provide for accessibility. So at the end of the day, yes, there are rules in place. Standards will definitely help. However, if you already have people around you, and especially when it comes to public procurement in a government ministry, and especially in the inclusion ministry, who actually want to make sure that a call is accessible, then it will definitely help. And following up, okay, we actually made sure that with the terms and conditions for the different bidders, it would make sure that the conference halls, conference rooms would be accessible in a number of ways, what lighting would be used, but also how we would make sure that we have signposting. But then also to assess the different bids, there were a number of different venues who made a bid for this conference, and we made sure that we had autistic people themselves who actually went with us to see the venue, to also see, okay, involving disabled people themselves in the process. So this is something which was mentioned by earlier speakers in other panels. So it's important to have a collaborative effort, not just to have the will to make a change, but also to involve the experts themselves. And this, for me, is a very good example because, yes, there is the obligation in the European Accessibility Act to make sure that if you have public procurement, it has to follow certain rules. And obviously, when it actually comes to anything covered by the European Accessibility Act, it has to be followed. There's, in the 2014 directive, the obligation to follow specific rules, and the European Accessibility Act fills in some of these blanks. However, unless there's a political will and unless there's a practical will, it will not work out. So I'd like to mention another good example, and I'll end here. So one thing which helped us a lot was our cooperation with the Department of Contracts in the Ministry of Finance. So this is the entity in the Maltese government which is responsible for the public procurement directives. So they were the ones who themselves suggested to us before the act went into force, okay, let's actually work on a contract circular, a formal document which will be sent out to all directors general of different public entities, explaining what the act is and how it will work when it actually comes to public contracts. And this will actually helps a lot because you are bringing together different stakeholders, and not only that, we were actually happy to see that the Department of Contracts also engaged with other counterparts counterparts across Europe. So there's a project which is led by DG Grow through a private contractor, and it works on organization of workshops in the 27 member states to develop dialogue on the use of strategic public procurement. So green, social, and innovation policy objectives. When it comes to social policy objectives, this actually includes like accessibility, design for all, and like they took the initiative, they are leading on this in Malta, and also pushing, for example, for the use of preliminary market consultations, like before a tender is issued. Why? Because to use this, we have a portal, it's called the EPPS portal, Electronic Public Procurement System portal. The portal is already accessible because it has to follow the guidelines of the Web Accessibility Directive. So this way we are already like pushing a system in Malta whereby we are encouraging entities to have this pre-consultation, because this way independent experts, including OPDs, organizations of persons with disabilities, can also give their input. So I mean, this way we're making sure that we have as many voices as possible to make sure that public procurement will eventually be accessible. And this was also like publicized for a long time. In fact, anyone with a government-issued computer has a lock screen, which changes from time to time, and the process was also like publicized there in the few weeks in June, also like to raise awareness before entering into force of the Accessibility Act. So those are two examples for the time being. Thanks.
Okay, Esther, thank you so much. And now I'd like to ask Peter if he's online. Peter has a great experience because he works with report guidelines for public procurements of ICT products and services in European Union. So maybe you have some good examples about procurements and accessibility. Peter, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of good examples because, why? We are developing, I'm leading an expert group that is developing this guidance for the European standardization organizations. The guidance is about how to really implement accessibility in the requirements of a public procurement. And we asked around, we asked practitioners of public procurement, and the feedback we got was usually the problems they had. So I can talk more about that and the solutions partially, and about the guidance. But yeah, the experience is we asked for good examples, but we got only the ones where it didn't work in order to be able to get solutions for them in the guidance.
Okay, so, but something about guidance then. I think guidance also are good examples, like their own.
Okay, yep, so, yeah, let's do that. We are developing this guidance, the title you already mentioned, so thank you very much. It's long and I never remember because it itself took a whole month to get it well. It is about helping the contracting authorities to conduct a procurement that for accessible ICT and how the European Accessibility Act and the standards can be used for that. There was two guidances before, or there are actually, but they were born before the new Public Procurement Directive, right before in 2014. So this new guidance will aim to be up to date with the Public Procurement Directive, with the European Accessibility Act, and with the standards as much as possible. They are still a bit of a moving target. So it will help the practitioners, the contracting authorities to use these tools, to use the standard in their public procurement, and also how to do that, how to address the different parts of the public procurement procedure, beginning from the writing the tender, setting the selection and exclusion criteria, setting the technical specifications for products and services that are in the scope, but also which are out of the scope, or like fully out of the scope even, or when some functions can be addressed by requirements in the EAA. It helps. It aims to help to with how to use the award criteria to go beyond the legal requirement, because there's always more to do, and it wouldn't be good if finally having the rules, having the requirements in a detailed manner, then everybody would say, okay, that's all we want to do now. So there's a possibility to go beyond by offering the bidder to be better, their bids to be better by addressing more accessibility and getting points for that through the award criteria. And another very important aspect of it, because we are aware that the knowledge is, the expertise is unfortunately limited in Europe and everywhere else as well, but it might not be there for contracting authorities. So we look at the conformity assessment from a perspective of how they can actually evaluate existing conformity assessments, or how they could do conformity assessments for different parts in the different parts of the procedure. So when they check the bid, up to the point when they get actually the service or product delivered. And I would just like to mention one more thing, because not everything that is procured is something that already exists or exactly on the shelf. So we will also address, the guidance will also address the area of products and services which are not off the shelf, which are off the shelf, which need some adjustments, so the bidder cannot just fully show them, or even what happens when the technical specifications cannot actually pinpoint the exact product or service, and there's a bigger scope for innovation, because those things happen as well. There are such public procurement, and it's very important, and in that case as well, accessibility can be prescribed and also checked and ensured when the delivery time comes.
Okay, Peter, thank you so much for your comments, and thank you for possibility to participate. I know that you should go in 4 minutes, so we'll continue our panel with other issues, and we'll keep in touch with you if you would like to know more about guidelines, which I would say are very, very important for us. So yes, I would like to ask Chiara, maybe you can say some words about examples, still about good examples. And I also know that you are very much involved in standards. So maybe you also can continue how important those standards are and about your work on that field.
Thank you very much, and with great pleasure. First of all, I would like to thank the meeting organizers for having ANEC. ANEC is the European Association representing consumers in standardization. We are supporter and contributors of AccessibleEU. We would like to congratulate AccessibleEU for this wonderful event, as well as the achievements. We would like to congratulate all of us for the European Accessibility Act. We have all been working in different capacities for this landmark legislation, and now we are celebrating the applicability after many, many years. As ANEC, we represent consumers in standardization in many sectors. Accessibility is one of our priorities. We are very, very honored to collaborate with like-minded partners, and the European Disability Forum is one of our most trusted partners. They are chairing our accessibility working group. Why do we have consumers and standards? Because we have several legislation at the European level using standards to support the implementation of the legislation. And the European Accessibility Act is one of them. According to Article 15, products and services which are in conformity with harmonized standards shall be presumed to be in conformity with the accessibility requirements of the directive. Standards are also important in the public procurement framework. Gunther, you mentioned that now it's interesting because we are going to discuss money. And I would like to add, we are going to discuss our money, because public procurement is our money.
Exactly.
and it has to be spent in a way to benefit all of us. I would like to start with some legal details that late in the day are not perhaps ideal, but are important to understand how public procurement works with respect to the Accessibility Act, so that we can then mention examples, but also future examples, because we believe that the applicability of the European Accessibility Act will unlock the potential even more of public procurement. Again, I will need to quote some articles. I will try to do it as simpler as I can. Being a lawyer, it's not always easy. If there are other lawyers in the room, I would be very pleased to discuss and to get questions, because basically what I want to say in short is that accessibility is mandatory in public procurement under certain conditions. And the future European Accessibility Act standards can be used to provide presumptual compliance with this obligation. How do we get there? Because we have Article 24, paragraph 1 of the Accessibility Act, which makes a reference to the public procurement directives and says that the accessibility requirements are mandatory accessibility requirements in the Directive on Public Procurement. And when we look at the Public Procurement Directive, we see that technical specifications, which define the requirements for goods, services, and works being procured, shall, as a general rule, be drawn up with accessibility in mind. This means that considering the needs of people with disabilities and designing the procurement to be usable by the broadest range of individuals is mandatory. When, of course, the public procurement is about products and services for general public. Finally, final article is Article 25 of the European Accessibility Act, which indeed says that the conformity with the harmonized standard shall create a presumption of compliance with Article 24 of the European Accessibility Act if those articles are, if the requirements are met by these standards. So I think I might have lost half of the room by now, but don't worry, this is typical when we discuss legislation. We are also discussing the acquis of European legislation that has been built over many years. It is inevitable to have this kind of connections between articles and amongst the different types of legislation. Once more, let me repeat that accessibility is mandatory in public procurement under certain conditions, and that the future standards of the European Accessibility Act can be used to provide compliance with that. Also, in terms of examples, I wouldn't like to forget to mention our first accessibility directive, the Web Accessibility Directive. Most of the websites that public authorities are having are the object of public procurement. So there is already a tradition and examples of good public procurement, because of course it's mandatory. We have heard about the guidelines that are going to be drafted to support even more, but we already have a standard on accessibility of ICT, public website and apps. And again, they are the object of public procurement tenders most of the time. Sometimes they're made in-house, but I think this is one of the best examples we can make.
Okay, thank you, Chiara, so much. Maybe, and I can ask Alistair more about what is your feeling about standards, about using of standards, because you said all your examples, you said it should be accessible, but it's always quite important to understand what does accessibility means and what for accessibility is. So maybe you can continue, and then I hope Monserrata will get back with better internet connection.
Yes, when it comes to standards and guidelines, at the end of the day, what we have seen in Malta, not just in public procurement, but in different areas with different sectors, was that entities need legal certainty. They need to know exactly what they're going to implement and what they're not going to implement. And in many other areas, because public procurement has its own rules under the Accessibility Act when it comes to sanctions, in many other areas, there's a possibility of, for example, fines if you do not comply. So it is very important to, first of all, have guidelines, definitely, even if they are non-binding, which give a bit more of an explanation. And even nationally, we did also issue guidelines, both in general and also specific areas, such as with public procurement. But then, when it comes to standards, we feel, and many different entities feel, that these are important, so they will know exactly what boxes to tick. And when I say that, I do not mean that we should have a checklist approach, so something which was brought up earlier, but it is more about to be able to regulate oneself. At the end of the day, if we do look at Directive 2014-24, it does mention that, if you have procurement intended for natural persons, whether they're in the public or whether staff, unless there's a justified case, you have to take into account accessibility criteria or design for all, and for this you have to explain specifically what to go by. As was mentioned also by other colleagues, we do have certain mandates in place. For example, products and services in ICT, linked to the 301-549 standard, which will be revised. Also, when it comes to the built environment, this is important for Malta because Malta opted into built environment provisions. So at the end of the day, since we have these guidelines in place, which are binding national guidelines on the built environment, binding standards actually, sorry, then we have to make sure that for an entity, a public entity, which is actually contracting for services, then the premises from which the services are delivered are also in line with not only the minimum requirements of the Accessibility Act, but also with further standards, including national standards, which we actually have in place. So in this respect, yes, legal certainty is important. If you look at the Accessibility Act, it mentions this, in recital 90, and it also goes beyond. We do know that in a number of areas, there are no specific technical standards, so it is important to actually have these for different providers. But then again, it comes back to legal certainty. For example, one thing which comes to mind is when we were discussing with the banking sector, this was actually a couple of weeks ago, there were simple questions. For example, when it comes to self-service terminals, with EPOS terminals, so basically the terminal that you actually use in a shop to be able to make a card purchase. Is that considered a self-service terminal under the Accessibility Act? And then further questions. Okay, but we don't actually produce those ourselves. We actually buy them from a supplier outside of the EU, and then we actually distribute them. So what are our obligations? Are we an importer? So all of these things. So that is where guidelines, standards, so the more concrete, the more direct, the better. And when it actually comes to public procurement specifically, it's important to actually mention how government will be involved. For example, with EPOS terminals, this is not just something which banks use. Malta, tourism is a very strong driver of the Maltese economy. And if, for example, you go into a museum, you would actually have to buy your ticket. So there's the accessibility of tourism, we heard about this earlier, but also if you actually want to make a card purchase to get your ticket, then again, you're going to have EPOS machines. They also have to be procured by the government. Or else, if, for example, you need to organize an event, you have to make sure there's also, let's say, different rules. For example, let's say for government ministries organize a major press conference, you have to have sign language interpretation, whereas you have to have captioning. But according to which rules do you have to go by? And this has to also be in technical specifications if you're actually tendering and using third parties. Finally, there's also issues such as websites. For example, with websites, as mentioned before, there's a Web Accessibility Directive which already regulates the public sector, but then there is also, let's say, specific rules, and these rules will change, 301-549 will be updated. So I mean, how will this affect people? So it's very important to have outreach. And with the approach, it's important that, okay, with the presumption of conformity, we do not approach different entities in Malta in a punitive way, but we actually want to work with them, discuss with them, And finally, have them on board. There's a specific board also on tests of reasonableness, like when things are not clear. So at the end of the day, if you engage people properly, if you have proper engagement and outreach, and if you also involve, at the end of the day, the beneficiaries, like disabled people and their organizations, this will be the best way. It's not just about checklists, as I mentioned before. It's about having a customer-centered approach, and with dialogue, we'll be able to have the best way forward to have not only guidance, but also standards that will be able to guide people, both at national level and also supranational level. Thanks.
Thank you, Oster, so much. And it's always very important to have a guidelines, but standards, it's much more important because you know exactly how to do it. And it's mandatory, as you said. So, Montserrat, are you there? And can we hear you now?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, could you say something about a good practice and standards, maybe?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Gunther. Well, you said before that 14% of the GDP is invested in public procurement. In Spain, it's a bit more. But that combined with the percentage of persons with disabilities and with other limitations has, as a result, a very transforming power that we have to use. I would like to highlight a very simple example of how we have improved the accessibility in our services. Up to 2024, the campaigns on advertisement and institutional communication in Spain were inaccessible. But we started in this Ministry of Social Rights to do them accessible. And we introduced subtitles, audio descriptions, sign language, and cognitive information. That was a very small project because we are a small ministry, and we work hard in order to disseminate this good practice in other ministries. And at the end, we use, in fact, the transposition of the directive to introduce a provision in our law in order to do all the institutional campaigns in Spain accessible. That means that from 2024, in Spain, every institutional campaign has subtitle, audio description, sign language, and cognitive information. So, that means that the change is possible, but we cannot trust only in the goodwill of the operators. We could disseminate this good practice because of the legislation. And I don't want to sound conservative, but the reality is that we are now today celebrating the entry into force of one law. So the big change came from the regulation. And we don't have to forget it in order to follow improving accessibility through legal requirements. It's a good way and it's a efficient way. And about standards, I just want to highlight that well, standardization. I look at it from the point of view of the surveillance authorities. They have a big and an important role from 20th June forward. And of course, the certification of the policies and the products and services that will be in the market from June. It will be much easier to prove their accessibility if we connect them with the standards. And it will have other benefits, of course, for buyers, because it ensures a high level of accessibility. It doesn't impose additional barriers depending on the country. And for the suppliers, it makes possible that small and medium-sized enterprises be competitive as well, because they play with the same rules. So I think standards are in general positive for all, and we will use it for sure.
Okay, thank you so much. And we have left only 6 minutes. And I really would like to ask some questions from the room. So what I propose, we are going to talk more about challenges. Could all of you say few challenges which could be to transfer directive to the national legislation and how it could work according to the procurements? Challenges for national legislation and procurements. But just in a few words, because we don't have very much time here in panel, and then we'll go, yeah, I see you have a question already. So, who could start? Chiara? Chiara, let's start.
Okay, hello.
Yeah. No, we are waiting for questions from panel. No, now we are panel, and then you can ask a question in a 1 minute, in a 2 minutes, okay? Chiara?
Thank you very much. As a European association, it's not my place to give national examples in terms of implementation. What I can see is that despite the legal obligations, accessibility is still not happening in public procurement. With the Accessibility Act, we will have a list of requirements which are in the annexes which should help public procurement. But we should not forget that the Public Procurement Directive itself will be revised in the near future, and we call for more accessibility and mandatory requirement in the future legislation. It's clear that the present text is not working enough.
Thank you, Chiara. So we are going to European legislation. Okay. Now, Alistair?
Yes, very briefly. So my colleague mentioned the need for revision of legislation. It all boils down to mindset. When there was the call for consultation by the Commission earlier this year, there was a question asking, okay, who actually agreed that socially responsible procurement was to be a priority and who did not agree, whether it was still relevant. 43%, which is a good number, but still just 43% of respondents felt it was still relevant, but 35% of respondents either disagreed or strongly disagreed. There's 35% of people who actually responded from around the European Union. And this is worrying because at the end of the day, whether at national level, whether at EU level, if people actually do not see that this is important, that not only the legislation itself, but also the way it is implemented, is done in a way that prioritizes design for all, then we have a very big problem. So unless we change that mindset, then we can't go further. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. And the same question to Montserrat. Are you still there? So what could be a challenges maybe in Spain?
I will focus on one simple challenge, which is we lack of a culture of accessibility. That means that in society and, of course, within public administrations, we don't know what's accessibility. And my impression is that most of the time in my job, daily day-to-day work, I do pedagogy of accessibility, and it's okay. But we have to be conscious that we need to follow teaching what is accessibility, what do persons with disabilities need, what must be included in the public procurement procedures in order to include accessibility and in a broad sense. So I would say the challenge, a big challenge, is to disseminate a culture of accessibility.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists. And now we have a questions. I've seen two already. You have microphone.
Can I also comment on that?
Yeah, you would like to comment?
Peter.
Yes, just very shortly.
You said you have to leave. Okay, yes.
I cannot have a camera after that time. But as for the challenges, I would comment on the challenges of implementation, because as somebody mentioned that it's not working good enough. So the public procurement directive is there since 2014 and applicable 2016, and it's still not a lot of public procurement that results in accessible products and services. So, and the situation is not only because people don't want to, but because there's a lack of knowledge and a lack of practice. So apart from having a guidance on that, it is important that contracting authorities do as much as possible to work together with the market, to let them know in advance, to be able to prepare with accessible offers. And I think the most important thing is just not going to this duly justified clause and people trying not to procure accessible. So I think any solution that would result in an accessible purchase of products or services is a good solution, just not going to the exclusions and not trying to procure accessible. So I think that's a big challenge of implementation. It might need some flexibility.
Okay, Peter, thank you so much. I can read on my screen last minute. So, last questions? Yeah.
Okay, since I have the microphone, I will use the last seconds.
Okay, great.
So I'm Jukka-Pekka from the European Parliament, and I can tell you why the EU institutions now face the same challenge and how we've started facing it in the European Parliament. So EU money, the EU institutions have to buy accessible now. There's a financial regulation that tells us how to use budget money, and there's an Annex 1 and a famous point 17.3, which says that we have to buy, rent, procure accessibly under certain conditions. And how did we face this challenge? The first thing was to set up a group with procurement specialists, accessibility specialists, including persons with disabilities. We drafted guidelines. We ran them past procurement professionals to see if they are understandable. We collected good practice, workflows, and ended up with about 20 pages of guidelines. And these guidelines now help us to face further challenges, and that's why we are celebrating here. I'm a digital accessibility officer myself, and this role seems to be reserved for other digital accessibility officers or team members as well. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Do we have one more question? Yeah. Two are too many. Okay? Yeah. Let's take and then one more and that's it.
Just one question. I feel a lot of fear of people to procure without standards. In architecture, which is we do since 100 years, are competitions on good architecture. There's no definition of good architecture. Eiffel Tower was procured as good architecture. Should we not do that again and more? We have legal things as, for example, the competitive dialogue and so on. We can go to the market and ask them, give our suggestions on what can be better in accessibility. Because we know that accessibility now, if we have a standard, in 5 years it will not be applicable anymore because technology has changed, society has changed and so on. So should we not just make choices and then from case to case try to think on what is accessible?
Okay, thank you so much. We take a last one question and then try to answer. Can we get a microphone here? No. Only one more question. Can we get, yeah, for you. I seen you first. Yeah. I'm really sorry, but
Muchas gracias. Well, it's more comment, but let it be not the music number, okay, for our tops, but let it be a comment as a good practice. Maybe the best practice from Croatia is, please imagine town in European Union, they get money for the new theater. Project is well done, but state agency for financing and contracting, after a very short education program, 2 days only, 50 young ladies and only one young man in this agency. They learned enough to start to analyze projects. So for this theater in this town, in European Union, somewhere, ex-Epsilon town, okay? They found, they are not engineers, they are not architects. They found 3 basic mistakes. I personally learned them. They are managers, mostly, okay? Something like this, okay? So the corridor was not wide enough. Ramp was not, as we insist in Croatia, 5% only, not 6, 5, okay? And it was curved ramp, okay? And it was something very important connected with safety and fire protection. So in this agency that exists in every member state of Union, almost like persons, they notice these basic mistakes. And although this building license was finished and given, they said, what is going on? So this correction in project has to be done. Every one of us, every citizen can notice something that is not correct. So this is a term for our rocking.
Okay.
We will not stop with rocking.
Yeah, not stop with
This
rocking,
rock is continuing. We have to be more serious and we have to give opportunity to all citizens to notice what is not going on correctly. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and it shows how important training is, by the way. And maybe you are a very good trainer. So, would you like to comment some answers to those questions? Carol?
Yes, with pleasure. I think the last point is also answering the penultimate point, in the sense that we need standards because we have a legal framework using it, and it is not, people are not afraid not to use standards for private procurement, but it's more difficult to do so. Training is needed, but now we are going to have this legal framework, as I said, relationship between the Accessibility Act and the Public Procurement Directive. There is no excuse anymore not to procure accessible.
Thank you. Yes.
So just a couple of brief comments. I agree with my colleague about standards. Definitely it goes back to the point of legal certainty, and also we'll know what to go by, what not to go by. However, unfortunately, we are also human beings. The fact that there are standards in place does not mean that we're going to follow standards. So here I go back to the point which Montserrat actually made as regards a culture change. At the end of the day, it's important that, okay, there's the will, but also that at the end of the day, people actually want to follow accessibility, want to include others, want to do this, be it like a building, be it anything else that's being procured. And the gentleman at the beginning mentioned the issue of rethinking matters and the fear of actually being able to procure accessible. Definitely, I mean, there is a fear, and I understand, because if there's the possibility of sanctions, there's a possibility of a tender being annulled, yes, I mean, I would be afraid, but this is like where the importance of a collaborative approach that comes in, involving all different parties, having carrot and stick approach, but also like emphasizing a lot the importance on dialogue, and with the contest that you mentioned also, let's not forget, for example, on European level, the Accessibility Award, which happens every year. So it's important to have these things, important to celebrate, but at the end of the day, it's important to have collaborative approach mechanisms locally and at European level, and at the end of the day, most importantly, a culture change, because without that, it's useless to have all of the standards in the world. They will help with legal certainty, but have to want to change things and want to be accessible. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Monserrata, do you have any comments?
Yes, I agree completely with Alistair. It's not an issue of convincing, it's an issue of share and make people understand that accessibility is an opportunity for all of us, for society. So now we have the European Accessibility Act, and the requirements are quite using or not the standards. Of course, with the standards is always easier.
Okay, thank you, my panelists. Thank you, everyone, for being so patient. And I'd like to finish by what Alejandro started. He said we need to rock, and I have ideas that we have a fantastic song about very small world, which was written in 60s, last century. And the idea was that we need a small world where everybody is happy. And the song is a Yellow Submarine. So I'm sure that we need accessible Yellow Submarine for the future, and we all will be included there. Thank you so much, and thank you for a fantastic conference we had.
Thank you so much, Gunther, Anka, and of course, you too. It was really a pleasure to hear from you. Yeah, an equal Europe for everyone. We move with you. Let's see the video.
Different people with and without disabilities carrying out daily activities in the city, demonstrating that accessibility is good for all.
The Europe I have in mind that leaves no one behind, neither below nor far away. It always has a better way. It's a Europe you can see, hear, and feel, because that's how it should be. The Europe that is equal for everyone, that makes us equal one by one, that revolves around us, that moves toward us, that lifts us up, drives us, and guides us, so that nothing can stop us from making our dreams come true. We move with you. We move with you.
Yes, what a beautiful video. I really want to thank you all for this amazing event. Thank you all the people who worked behind the scenes, the team who made this come true. It was really a pleasure to be here today. And I really hope that we will be amigos para siempre. So, have a very good day, have a very good dinner. Hope to see you soon. Hasta luego. And I want to ask the national experts here on stage and also the AccessibleEU seniors, because of course we want to make a picture with you. See you soon. Bye-bye.